Right after Jack was born, Nate quit his job. Calling himself a travel writer, he barely worked, relied on my income, and led a carefree life driving across the country. One night, returning from a trip, Nate came home with a young woman holding a baby.
"This is my mistress, Maria, and my child. I'm giving Jack to you. We're getting a divorce,"
he said, pushing the signed divorce papers at me, breathing heavily.
"I'll come to pick it up in a week. Make sure you've signed it by then."
A week later, Nate and Maria came back, and Jack and I told them,
"You can't divorce Mom, because
the car cost $64,000. You still haven't paid me back." Nate's cheeks twitched.
Besides, Dad, you're living off Mom's earnings. Maybe you should wait to get divorced until you can support yourself."
Maria looked bewildered. Nate started to make a muddy excuse. I smirked to myself. "All right, Nate, it's time for you to pay up for all the freedom you've had. I'm Lisa, a 50-year-old housewife. I live with my husband of the same age, Nate, and our 8th-grade son, Jack. I met Nate through a mutual friend, and we started dating." Always confident and lively, Nate was full of interesting topics and great at making conversation. We had fun times together. I thought it would be wonderful to spend my life with someone like him, so when he proposed to me at a fancy restaurant, I was over the moon. However, less than a year later, I regretted getting married.
"I wish we could have kids soon,"
considering our age. We were having such conversations when we were blessed with a honeymoon baby, and I was over the moon. Looking back, I feel that was the happiest time of my life. I was suffering from severe morning sickness, unable to clean or prepare meals, but Nate never blamed me and was always considerate.
"Lisa, do you think you could eat some chicken porridge? Or maybe some white fish? I've heard fruits are good for you too."
Nate, who's not great at cooking, would buy ready-made porridge, boxed meals, and fruits from the local supermarket and bring them to me as I lay in bed. To keep me from feeling sick, he'd eat his meals in the dining room and come back to pick up the dishes and even wash them. On weekends, he'd take over the laundry and cleaning. "Nate, I'm sorry for the trouble, and thank you for everything," I'd say, and he would smile, gently patting my head.
"It's only natural for spouses to support each other. Your body isn't just yours alone, so please don't overdo it."
Not only was he attentive and kind, but he also held a full-time position at a major corporation. I deeply felt that marrying him was truly the right decision. However, our happiness came to an abrupt end. I began having contractions early in the morning, so Nate took a day off to take me to the hospital, waiting outside the delivery room for our baby to be born. Eventually, our baby was safely born. The midwife went to Nate to show him the baby wrapped in a blanket, smiling as she said,
"Congratulations. It's a healthy boy."
At that moment, Nate's face changed.
"What? It's not a girl."
"It's a boy."
Nate's expression shifted from one filled with anticipation to one of intense disappointment. After moving to the hospital room, Nate let out a deep sigh and muttered in an exasperated voice,
"I, the boy, huh?"
At this moment, Unaware of the seriousness of the situation, I offered a wry smile and tried to console Nate. "You were hoping for a girl, weren't you? You were told it might be a boy by the doctor. That's too bad. I've heard there are still families who desire a male heir." However, neither my Mill nor Nate seemed particularly keen on having a boy. Though Nate wanted to know the gender, personally, I was indifferent.
I always dreamed of being a father to a daughter.
Nate became furious.
Men are just smelly, dirty, and not cute at all. Why didn't you have a girl?
I was infuriated by his awful remark. There's no way to choose that. Even if you try gender selection, it's not 100% successful. Our baby is precious to us. The gender shouldn't matter.
It should matter. Ah, damn it. Seriously, men are just unnecessary.
Nate just left the hospital room after saying that. He never came to the hospital again, didn't contact me, and I had to be discharged alone. Since my parents' house was too far away and I couldn't rely on them, I reluctantly called my Mill to ask for a ride.
Nate was really looking forward to having a girl. I can understand why he would complain.
I explained the situation to my Mill, but as expected, she took Nate's side.
"You're not going back to your parents, right? I can come over to help."
"Thank you. If there's anything I need, I'll let you know." I replied with a forced smile, politely declining. It's only a 30-minute drive from my in-laws' place. But even if it's busy, raising a child just with Nate is far more comfortable than relying on my Mill, who only has sarcastic comments to offer whenever she opens her mouth. I thought that Nate was just in a huff and would soon cheer up and adore the baby. But I was too optimistic. I began living what felt like a solo hellish life. Before the birth, Nate and I had fun picking out baby furniture online and reading articles and books about babies, wondering what our life would be like. But as soon as Nate found out the baby was a boy, he seemed to lose interest. After we got home from the hospital, he dumped everything on me, from naming the baby to all the meticulous care, and abandoned his responsibilities. "Nate, could you hold Jack for a bit? He's been crying non-stop, and I can't get anything done, not cooking, not cleaning." Even when I pleaded with Nate after he got home, he wouldn't even glance at Jack and coldly retorted,
You know I'm tired from work, right? Show some compassion. Dinner's not ready. Then I'll just eat out. Taking care of the baby is the mom's job, isn't it? I'll overlook the mess in the house. Just make sure the laundry is done. I need something to wear.
Even as Jack wailed, Nate ignored him and just played with his phone. No matter how much I asked, he wouldn't change a diaper, and baths and feedings were all up to me. Of course, dealing with night crying was out of the question. One evening, as we were watching TV and Jack started crying, Nate showed his irritation.
Man, he's been crying for a while now, hasn't he?
He seems sleepy, but even when I hold and soothe him, he won't go to sleep.
I better walk will stop the crying. Go outside.
I couldn't believe my ears. It's February, and it's 8 p.m. You want me to go for a walk while it's snowing? Are you sane? When I spoke up, Nate twisted his mouth into a smirk.
Driving around in the car would be a waste of gas. It's cold. Maybe he'll stop crying quickly.
I was filled with furious anger at words that shouldn't come from a father. Holding Jack, I grabbed the car keys, slammed the living room door shut, and left the house. After securing Jack in the car seat and driving around the neighborhood for a while, I sighed in relief when I heard him breathing softly from the back seat. Upon returning home, I laid him in his crib, ignoring Nate, who was rolling with laughter watching TV. One day, growing increasingly suspicious of Nate, he came home in the early afternoon. "You're home early today." As I was feeding Jack his baby food, Nate casually said while taking off his jacket,
"Quit my job."
"Huh, what?" I was stunned.
"I've been thinking, I'm not cut out to be an employee. Starting my own business or working freelance, using my talents, that's what suits me. From now on, I'll live freely, not tied down by any company."
Nate spoke proudly, and my mind went blank. Tentatively, I asked, "Do you have a new job lined up?"
"I love driving, right? Plus, I won first place in a composition contest in 3rd grade. I think I've got talent. So, I'm going to wander the country and write travel logs."
I felt dizzy looking at Nate's shining eyes. He had been in sales for 12 years, and now he was switching to a writer. Nate hadn't even written a blog, and the computer in his study was just for show. Typical of Nate's whims, he must have been inspired by some article online.
"Don't look so worried. In 2 years, I'll be making over $100,000 a year. It seems like anyone can do it, so someone as talented as me will definitely be a hit."
I switched my gaze between Jack, who was eating his side dishes with his hands, and Nate, who was going on about himself. I had planned to return to work after Jack turned 1, but now I faced the prospect of supporting an unemployed husband. That afternoon,
"First things first, gotta get the right setup."
Nate left full of energy to buy the latest model computer at an electronics store. One evening, after putting Jack to sleep and doing the dishes, I received a call from my mill. Despite feeling it was a hassle, I answered the phone. "Hello,"
What have you been filling his head with?
she barked as soon as I answered. "I'm not sure what you mean."
He had a secure job for life there, with an annual salary of $80,000, and now suddenly he's jobless.
"That's unthinkable. That's exactly what I wanted to say."
It's because you only pay attention to the baby. Nate got stressed and quit his job. Isn't it a wife's duty to take care of her husband, you failure?
"If you have complaints, please address them to him. I'm busy, so I'm going to hang up now." While she continued to rant, I hung up and ignored her calls and messages for a while. My anger at Nate's selfishness didn't subside, but I was determined to work seriously to raise Jack. I hoped that by seeing me juggle housework and childcare, Nate might reflect on his actions, but it was in vain. Nate would lock himself in his study to tinker with his computer, or suddenly declare I'm going on a trip to the northern area and leave without contact, only to return days later. This forced me to rely on my workplace's childcare for sick children and work hard. I felt more like a single mom than just solo parenting. Juggling full-time work with raising a young child was challenging, but sharing parenting woes and encouragement with colleagues who also had young children helped lift my spirits. Thanks to my salary, we managed to get by, even affording a writing course that eventually led to earning $300 a month. However, our household finances still depended solely on my income. Nate never contributed his earnings to the household, spending it all as his personal allowance instead. Even the gas money, I was the one giving it to Nate. On a day when Nate had gone off to the South region, he returned home in a bright red sports car. What? Where did this car come from?
I fell in love with it at first sight and bought it. Can you believe it was only $50,000 for this beauty?
I nearly fainted. $50,000.
Yeah, I got bored of the old car after 2 years. This one's my new partner. A writer's gotta have a cool ride, right?
Seeing Nate smirk, I pressed my temples and asked, Wait, how did you pay for this? You have no savings, right?
Relax. It's on an 84-month loan. You can afford $600 a month, right? I'll be a bestseller soon, so just cover it until then.
I was dumbfounded at first, but soon anger started to bubble up. How could I possibly afford $600 a month? We're barely making ends meet as it is. Who do you think is causing all our financial troubles? Then Nate, distorting his face, shot back.
All you talk about is money. Money. It's so shallow. When did you become such a woman? Support your husband's dreams more. You're too practical. It's boring.
Saying that, he dumped his anger on me and locked himself in his room.
Daddy's back.
Jack, who had just woken up from his nap, stretched and asked me. Yes, he seems busy with work, and went to his room. Make sure to say welcome back when he comes down.
Okay, hey, Mommy. How long is Daddy going to stay at home?
I'll ask him later. My heart aching at Jack's lonely smile. Even after Jack started going to daycare, Nate didn't try to interact with him and continued with his cold demeanor. If Jack spoke to him, he would respond, but Nate never initiated conversation or made eye contact. I wondered if it might be better to get a divorce if things continued this way. On the other hand, I worried about how Jack would feel if he found out he was the reason for his parents' divorce. It was hard to take that step. 15 years have passed since Nate quit his job. His monthly income is still just a few $100s. The reason for his stagnant salary is clear. After mastering the computer, Nate discovered the joys of online gaming and put work second to gaming. On the rare occasions he does get a substantial income, it quickly goes towards in-game purchases, with the remainder spent on clothes or outings to nightclubs. If he ever buys a souvenir, he brags about it for a while.
Those cookies I bought the other day were delicious, right? It's because of my job that we can enjoy such nice things. You should be more grateful.
As for the sports car, my relief at finishing the payments was short-lived, as Nate quickly sold it and switched to a new car. Initially, I protested. I want you to contribute to the living expenses. Since you're a father, why not spend more time at home? Maybe cut back on pouring money into your hobbies. And so on. Then Nate, with veins bulging on his forehead, would explode in anger.
You're mocking me for my low salary, can't you? You look down on me and laugh.
That's not it. I just wish you'd act more like a father. When I spoke patiently, Nate, still angry, said in a rough tone,
Next year, I'll definitely be making $100,000 a year. Then, I'll have more free time to spend at home, and I'll contribute to the household. Stop nagging and just wait until then.
As we repeated these exchanges, it gradually became tiresome, and recently, I've given up on having discussions. Jack, perhaps taking his father as a cautionary tale, grew up to be a good and honest child. He always cares for me when I come home tired from work. He helps with the household chores, and when I wake up from napping on the sofa, I find a blanket over me. And on special days like my birthday or Mother's Day, he surprises me with a homemade dinner and a bouquet of flowers. He takes care of everything. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, I heard the front door unlock. Thinking Jack had returned from his tutoring class, Nate's voice then filled the air. Nate was talking to someone. As I removed my apron and went to see who it was, I was rooted to the spot. Nate was standing close to a young woman holding a baby. Hi there. The woman was dressed provocatively and wore heavy makeup. She must be a hostess from the club he frequents. But why would he bring her to our house? The woman who came in with Nate pinched her nose and boldly walked into the kitchen to peek into the pots. With a pitiful smile and a nasally voice, she sneered.
Oh, it smells like garlic. Nate, the smell will stick to my clothes.
Sorry, Maria. Hey, Lisa, do something about it.
It's fine. I'll endure it. Teehee, is dinner tofu? Such a humble dish, Nate. The full-course Italian meal was delicious.
Nate smiled smugly at the woman's boastful comment.
That place is really good. As you can see, my wife prefers these plain, poor dishes. It suits her.
Oh, Nate, you're so bad.
Their laughter only fueled my irritation. Because of his meager income, I'd been estranged from Italian cuisine for 15 years. Swallowing the words that almost slipped out, I asked Nate, and who might this be? The woman looked at me challengingly, her voice full of excitement.
Nice to meet you. I'm Maria. I'm Nate's wife.
Hey, don't get ahead of yourself.
Nate chided, glancing at Maria and the baby with a smitten smile.
This is my mistress, Maria, and our child. She actually gave me a daughter. Cute, isn't she?
The nose is just like Nate's.
The baby, dressed in pink, was cradled in Maria's arms, looking at me with round eyes. "So, is that so? And what do you want?" I asked coolly, and Nate grinned slyly.
I'm giving you Jack. We're getting a divorce.
He placed the signed divorce papers on the dining table and declared with a huff,
I'll come to pick it up in a week. Make sure you've stamped it by then.
Nate has had enough of you. I'll be taking over as his wife.
Maria, despite being the mistress, was incredibly arrogant. "Nate, where are you going? This is your home, isn't it?"
I don't want to live with you anymore. Once you and Jack are gone, I'll come back.
I was left dumbfounded by his absurd reasoning. The two of them left with a burst of laughter, and the distinctive noisy exhaust of the modified sports car faded into the distance. After being stunned for a moment, I came back to my senses and looked down at the divorce papers. As I stared at them, a fierce anger began to well up inside me. He abandoned the role of father simply because the child born was a boy. He quit his job on his own accord, not contributing the meager income to the household, but instead spending it all on himself. And now, to top it all off, he says we should get a divorce because he has a mistress and a child. I tore the divorce papers into tiny pieces and threw them into the trash can. I'm seething with anger. This isn't a joke. How selfish can you get? I clenched my fists. If that's how it's going to be, I have plans of my own. You're going to pay for everything you've done up until now. A week later, Nate came back. They did not bring baby. Probably left the baby with someone, anticipating a showdown. When Jack answered the door, Nate showed a hint of awkwardness.
Hi there, I'm Maria. I'll be your new mom. Nice to meet you.
Ignoring Maria's overly enthusiastic greeting, Jack looked straight at Nate.
Dad, you're back, so you should say hi to Mom, right?
Nate brushed off Jack's comment with a grimace. He led Maria to the dining table, holding her hand, and seated her next to himself. As I was making tea, Nate barked at me.
We don't need tea. Just hand over the divorce papers.
Well, it's going to be a long discussion. Might as well have something to drink. I put on a smile and prepared tea for 4, placing it on the table. Jack sat across from Nate, and I sat opposite Maria. Jack, being in 8th grade now, I figured he could understand everything, so I decided to tell him the whole story. After taking a sip of tea to moisten my throat, I casually told Nate. I threw away the divorce papers.
What? Hey, you really don't want to divorce me that much.
Nate smirked, but Jack looked at him with evident disdain.
You can't divorce Mom, you know, because
the total cost for the 2 new cars, $80,000. You haven't paid me back yet. Nate's face went pale. Don't think I've forgotten. When are you going to pay me back? I covered for all of it, after all.
Yay, Dad. And how are you going to support yourself if you remarry this woman?
Jack chuckled lightly.
Since we're living on Mom's earnings, maybe it's better to postpone the divorce until you can support yourself, right?
Nate was visibly flustered. Maria's eyes widened as she looked at Nate's profile.
What's this about? Nate, what's going on?
No, it's just an inside joke. Maria doesn't need to know.
I slammed the printed payment statements in front of him. Look, this is for the previous car, 84 installments, and this is for the new car. Maria, do you see? It's all being paid from my card. After checking the statements, Maria tilted her head, puzzled.
Why doesn't Nate pay for it himself? You're making $100,000 a year, right? You were the section chief at Smith Corp.
Jack and I burst into laughter simultaneously. Really? Still carrying around a business card from 15 years ago?
That's practically fraud, isn't it? Your current title is unemployed.
We couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity.
No, I'm a freelance writer.
Self-proclaimed travel web writer, right, with an income less than a high school part-timer, used to earn $80,000, now what, about $4,000? Maria was shocked.
What? $4,000.
Yes, look.
Oh, no.
I showed Maria the bank statement. The monthly deposits of $400 or $500 from the same company name left her speechless.
So, all these designer clothes you're wearing, those shiny leather shoes, and the luxury sports car, everything was bought by your wife? Even all the meals you've treated me to were with your wife's money?
That's right. Look at this. I leaned over the desk, showing Maria the credit card statements. He took the card I hardly ever use and spent without asking.
I'll pay it back later. It's fine, isn't it? We're family.
Nate raised his voice.
In 2 or 3 years, I'm supposed to be making over $100,000. Maria, you believe in me, unlike these two, right?
Maria offered a non-committal smile. You said the same thing when Jack was a baby. 15 years later, nothing has changed. Beside me, Jack nodded. Maria, you can live with him or remarry him if you like, just as long as you settle the new car payments and the unauthorized card use I covered.
Of course, that's separate from the alimony and my child support, Dad.
Quiet. I get it.
Nate, no pleading, turned back to Maria.
So, Maria, you'll lend me the money to pay Lisa back, right?
Let me think about it, Nate.
Maria's face twisted uncomfortably. It seemed like a perfectly reasonable reaction to me.
What? I'll pay you back later. We're going to be married, so it's fine, right?
Nate said, trying to push his illogical reasoning on a hesitant Maria. I couldn't help but let out a wry laugh and picked up my phone. Now, it was time to start the second phase of my revenge. By the way, Maria, did you accompany Nate on his latest resort hotel trip? I asked cheerily, and while Maria awkwardly looked away, Nate, having become completely shameless, grinned.
Yeah, the view was beautiful. A really nice place.
That's wonderful to hear.
How did you know that?
With a bright smile directed at Maria, I continued. You see, my cousin works at the resort hotel. Since you both visited together, she decided to inform me about the affair and sent over some evidence photos. I opened the photo app on my phone, selected the image file, and placed my phone in the center of the dining table so everyone could easily see. Look at this, Bo. Who's that with Maria, I wonder? Maria froze as she peered at the image, while Nate, doing the same, quickly turned ashen.
Maria, who is this?
Hey, taking pictures without permission is an invasion of privacy, Maria exclaimed, losing her temper.
I calmly smiled and apologized. Sorry about that. My cousin couldn't stand my husband's infidelity and ended up taking quite a few photos.
Geez, making a big deal out of nothing. Nate, honey, it was just an acquaintance I happened to bump into. Don't worry about it.
She twisted her body and leaned on his arm, which Nate quickly shrugged off.
I made the reservation because you said you wanted to go.
At that moment, Nate's face stiffened.
Now that you mention it, you weren't there when I woke up in the middle of the night. Don't tell me you went to his room.
No, that's not it. Really, just an acquaintance.
As Maria repeated her excuses, I had to stop myself from laughing. I grabbed a large envelope from the end of the table, took out several photos and laid them out. Maria looked shocked, covering her mouth and letting out a shriek. These were photos sent to me last year, showing a heavily pregnant Maria closely huddled with a man, coming out of an obstetrics and gynecology clinic.
Hey,
It was just a favor to accompany me. Believe me, Nate.
Nate's voice carried a menacing tone, and Maria clasped her hands together, desperately making excuses. I began reading from the investigative report I had pulled from the envelope. Interesting, that day was a parenting class. Usually, if someone is accompanying, it would be the father, no doubt. Oh, isn't that baby the same one from before? Not Nate's child, then. As Maria fell silent, I smirked lightly. This man being the father of the child, but juggling another woman on the side, and then running away after the birth. How awful, poor Maria. As I sneered, Nate stammered, trying to defend Maria.
there's no way Maria would do something like that, right? Saying that the child's father is some other man, that can't be.
Sorry.
Maria's feeble apology left Nate momentarily frozen, his face flushing with a mix of anger and embarrassment.
So, after he ran off, you lied about the baby being mine to trap me into marriage. Don't mess with me.
Nate exploded in rage, and Maria fired back just as fiercely.
What? You were drowning in debt and leeching off your wife. Then you lied big time to me. You have no right to complain.
Then, Maria turned her anger towards me.
You're nasty too. You knew he was cheating and just let him do whatever he wanted.
That's right. I've been dealing with a husband who does whatever he wants for 15 years. I thought I'd hit him with irrefutable evidence and milk him for alimony. I let out a sarcastic smile. Sending lovey-dovey messages to my phone by mistake, suddenly dressing up, coming home reeking of women's perfume. It was all too obvious. At that, Jack crossed his arms and nodded.
You were always in such a good mood at home. Seriously, after everything Mom has done for you, how could you even think of cheating? What kind of nerve do you have?
Jack looked thoroughly disgusted. I wanted to know more about the woman he was seeing, so I hired a detective agency. They gave me a bunch of bonus photos, so I thought I'd share them with Nate too. I smugly informed the glaring pair. Well, I'm not the type to be instructed by boss. Remember saying that, pretty bold for someone who got fired for causing trouble. Nate's eyes widened in shock.
How did you know about that?
I heard it from the person who introduced us. I said with a sneer, enjoying the moment of revelation. You got fired because you touched a young girl's body and claimed it was all blown out of proportion because you were drunk. Nate trembled, his body shaking uncontrollably.
I just touched them over their clothes, but they were overreacting. It's okay if I was drunk. It doesn't matter.
That's pathetic, Dad.
Jack's voice was filled with disdain.
When I heard about it, I was mortified. I was more shocked by that than by the fact you never showed me any affection. It's embarrassing.
Really? What do you even think of women?
Nate, to think you're that kind of person. Gross.
Maria, now looking at Nate with disgust, chimed in.
What? I don't want to hear that from someone who tried to pin another man's child on me.
Nate shot back at Maria with a fierce glare.
At least I'm not as bad as you.
Both of you are terrible. The new employees you harassed are planning to sue you, so you better be prepared. Nate's shocked reaction.
What? For that?
They're not satisfied with just having you fired. They say they've suffered emotional distress and want compensation. Nate was incredulous.
I don't have that kind of money.
As Nate raged, his face turning beet red, Jack looked on, weary and disappointed.
Dad, you need to take responsibility for what you've done.
Directing a look of pity towards Nate. I then turned my gaze to Maria. Well, Maria, if you still want him, I can wrap him up for you with a bow.
I don't need such an old man.
Maria shot back as she stood up forcefully.
I thought he was a division chief at a big company with an annual salary of $100,000, so I considered making him the father.
She glared hatefully at Nate, speaking rapidly.
But he turns out to be a prideful liar, living off his wife, with bad habits around women and drowning in debt. I wasted my time with him. Give me back my time.
That's my line.
Nate stood up to retort.
I don't need a woman who cheats with another man. Never show your face to me again.
Then let's break up. Goodbye.
Maria stormed out of the house, and as Nate watched her leave from the doorway, he collapsed to his knees, sobbing and muttering resentments.
It's cruel, Maria. You said you loved me, yet you were carrying another man's child. She's a girl, but I don't want a child that's not mine.
I sharply rebuked the downtrodden Nate. You're facing this because you wanted a child with your mistress while abandoning your role as Jack's father. Children are not accessories. Think about Jack's feelings for once.
It's okay, Mom. I haven't thought of him as my father for a while now.
Jack said, smiling sadly. And I've recognized him as nothing more than a housemate for a long time. He slumped to the floor, sniffling pathetically, while I watched out of the corner of my eye and sighed. I've had enough, Nate. Let's discuss this through lawyers from now on. I told him in a solemn tone. The costs for the 2 cars I covered, the charges from the card you used without my permission, and alimony. After you've transferred all that to my account, I'll file for divorce.
How am I supposed to pay all that at once? Since we haven't filed for divorce yet, we can just cancel it.
Nate, his face smeared with tears and snot, lit up as if he had a brilliant idea.
That way, I can save on alimony and child support. Look, Lisa, I was wrong. Let's start over. He reached out to me.
I pushed him away reflexively. Don't joke with me. After that, Jack and I kicked out the persistently clinging Nate. After our divorce, Nate was kicked out by me and begged his mother for help. However, concerned about public image, she got furious about his infidelity and disowned him. He moved into a cheap apartment and started working seriously for the first time in 15 years. At 50, unable to secure a salaried position in sales, he finally found work in manual labor, getting scolded by supervisors younger than himself every day. Later, sued by the female employees, Nate avoided a lawsuit by paying a settlement, had paid for, forcing him to accrue more debt to settle his dues, which he funded by selling his luxury sports car. However, the money wasn't enough to cover the unauthorized credit card charges, alimony, and the cost of the first car I had paid for, forcing him to accrue more debt to settle his dues. Certainly, he must be working tirelessly only to have most of his earnings go towards repaying me, with very little left for himself. Of course, I also demanded alimony from Maria. Her parents covered it, transferring the money into my account. Her baby's father turned out to be a regular customer from her club. Maria, who broke the rules by getting pregnant with a customer's child, was fired and had to return to her parents' home. After giving birth, she too was disowned by her parents. Now, she leaves her baby at a daycare, working in a different club during the week, and taking a part-time job at a restaurant on weekends, enduring harsh days. Jack's child support is dutifully transferred to my account every month. We've contracted through a lawyer that should there be a single delay, we'd immediately sue. Now our high school freshman, Jack is working hard in an advanced placement class, aiming to become a pharmacist.
Once I graduate from college, I'll make things easier for you, Mom. Just wait.
Jack, who earns his own spending money through part-time jobs amidst his busy study schedule, said with a smile. Compared to the days I fretted over Nate's debts, working for college funds feels almost enjoyable. Going forward, I look forward to spending fulfilling days with my kind and reliable son,